always. So I grew up. Let's go back to the beginning. Right back to the beginning. I grew up as a shy, quiet. I say that to people now, and they're like, "What? You were shy and quiet? What? Things have changed." I was like, "Well, that was a long time ago." And I was overweight and really socially awkward, and I had no self-esteem. So I got into, the classic, oh, I'm going to get to a certain age, and then I find maybe Men's Health magazine, and I get into resistance training and get some great results. So I knew that exercise and movement, specifically resistance training, and some cardiovascular stuff and some sprint training, but we could do a whole podcast on the nuances of exercise and movement, couldn't we? So I got into that, and I definitely found I would actually feel quite a lot better after I did exercise. And I remember thinking, that's weird, because I'd never had any education or interest in how that would make you feel. So that's always been something that's been part of my life. And again, meaningful occupations. That's why I'm going to go and do some resistance training after this call. But I think, and I also through that got into eating healthy. I'm doing air quotes here because you can probably guess could you guess the type of healthy eating maybe I was focusing on or thinking was a
Of
good
course,
idea?
of
Yeah,
course. Classic low fat, high carb. Yeah,
eat every 3 hours, otherwise
yeah.
your muscles are going to fall apart. And I was very much committed to that. But I knew that if I ate healthy, just didn't eat highly palatable processed foods, I felt better. So already my own experience, my own life, I was thinking, okay, exercise helps, movement helps. Eating not and also not drinking excessive amounts of alcohol, because that's a big issue in I mean, I know it's a big issue in the US, but growing up in England, drinking culture is massive. And here in Australia. So cutting down, all these, I could see how lifestyle was influencing how I felt personally. But to actually then get into more of the metabolic psychiatry world, I was doing all the things. So I was exercising regularly. I was eating what I thought was healthy. I thought it was healthy. I guess it's better than eating, what's it in the US? What's the classic super unhealthy thing?
We have so many. We just have so
Yeah,
many.
I know. Yeah, you're like, it's the US.
Take your
It's hard
pick.
to find it. Yeah. It's just it will pop into my mind in a minute. But I was doing all the things. I was focusing on sleep. I was wearing my blue light blocking glasses at night. But I was having these episodic, and I mean, I did have the brain injury, so that was in 2011, maybe 2011, 10,
We have it as
20.
we have it as 2010 in the introduction.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I did have the brain injury, not to take the mick out of ABIs because they're very they're very debilitating for many reasons. But I think after that, I was doing all the things. So I was doing all the things that I was told or I thought were beneficial for health. I'm not saying they're not, but there was definitely a missing piece because I would in my mid like maybe probably early 30s. I was having these periods of time where I just felt so depressed. And I was like, my life is probably better because I moved to Australia and my life, and I had like a well-paid job. I met my now wife, I met my partner. I was living in a much better environment. I wasn't engaging in recreational and or pharmaceutical drug abuse, alcohol abuse. But I was still having these periods of just like absolutely seemingly out of nowhere periods of depression and feelings of suicidal thoughts. And I just going through, and I was kind of getting used to, okay, every couple of months or every 3 to 6 months I'll be completely debilitated. I won't be able to do anything. And then I came across, and I then started, so I started following Rob Wolf. If anyone doesn't know Rob Wolf is, I guess he's one of the OGs in this sort of lifestyle stuff. So check him out, and he does love a bit of a swear on his podcast as well, which is yeah, I'm
We
into
like
a bit of
that.
the old swear. Yeah, why not? Just don't play it in the car with your kids or something like that. And I came across, so it started with paleo paleo. So I keep doing air quotes, but paleo. So and I was like, okay, well, I remember thinking, but you've got to eat carbs. You've got to have bread. You've got to have pasta for energy because I was still in there, eat every 3 hours. And don't ever let your muscle waste away. Oh, don't. And then I actually got into, and I was actually experiencing really intense chronic persistent pain to the point of where that was worsening my mental health. So I felt at the time, and I think back, I was probably just really inflamed and I didn't understand that. So I got into, and then I started, getting into things like bulletproof radio. Is it bulletproof radio? Dave
Yeah, Dave
Asprey.
Asprey. Yep, you
Yeah,
mentioned that last time. That's right.
yeah. So yeah, going into that. But then to kind of fast forward a little bit, it was then getting into this idea of low carbohydrate, well, not just low carb, but ketogenic style eating. And again, the classic, and I probably said this last time, coming across a podcast with Chris Palmer, Dr. Chris Palmer, and he was talking about, and bear in mind, I've been in my work role by then with working with people with very complex mental, physical, emotional, intellectual challenges. So people that have had maybe schizophrenia 30, 40 years, people that have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, autism, and are literally locked into buildings where they cannot leave because they might get so violent or be at risk to themselves. So I'm seeing a lot of the mental health system. And he was talking about people with schizophrenia going into remission. And I was like, it doesn't happen, mate. That does not happen. And that's really sad, isn't it? That I'm a trained therapist who's like, that doesn't happen. People don't suddenly. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that, for example, psychosis, people can have psychosis and then recover, which is the recovery model of psychosis. But unfortunately, a lot of people just end up mentally or physically unwell for the rest of their life, and things just get worse and worse and worse. And hearing Chris Palmer on that podcast, I was like, firstly, I was in denial because, like, how come I didn't know about this? And why didn't anyone tell me? And surely they would have taught me this at uni, wouldn't they? Or I've been to a GP and they've never talked about carbohydrate restriction or anything like that. They've always said, and all my friends that are into fitness and personal training and all that stuff, they're like, no, you've got to have your carbs. My nutritionist has said you've got to have your carbs. And then I started applying it to myself. And that was probably just as a last ditch effort to be like, am I going to be really depressed and unable to function for the rest of my life every 3 to 6 months? Because obviously, just go out of action and I would recover and I would do all the things and things would get better. And I'm not saying it's simple as just stop eating bread and everything gets great. It's a long, but then I started applying it to my own life. And the deeper I got into it, I don't know about you, Casey, and please jump in if you want to, but I remember finding all these things about all the different conditions that carbohydrate restriction or metabolic therapies, metabolic psychiatry can help. I remember thinking, is this like a panacea for everything? I'm not saying it is, but what then motivated me was like, I felt, and I think I was still at this point, I still am, last time we spoke, I need to help as many people even know this stuff exists. So when you came across it, to chuck the question back to you, were you like doubtful at first, needed more information, and then became almost evangelical? Because that's where I think I was. I was like, everyone needs to know about this. And if I just tell people, then everything will be great.
100%. I love the way that you described that. But yeah, it's 100%. And the person who said it best, I think, encapsulates the way I feel about it. Was I asked Nina Teicholz about this. So she's the author of The Big Fat Surprise, and she described just laying down on the ground in the living room, crying to her husband, saying, "This can't be right. If this is right, then there's so much out there that's wrong." And when I got introduced to this stuff, I thought it was insane. But then I'm thinking back, to all of my certifications, all of the training that I received, and if this is right, and I think it might be, then everything else is wrong. And that, to me, actually created a resistance to where, for example, I remember listening to an interview that Nina Teicholz gave when her book came out in 2014. And I didn't even see the Facebook memories pictures of the book that I was reading for the first time until 2016. So yes, I thought it was nuts, to the point that you ever hear like the shelf analogy? If something, you learn something, you don't want to deal with it, so you just throw it on the shelf. I kind of treated it like that. So yeah, well said.
Yeah. And then you start going down the metaphorical rabbit hole, and it's like, oh, oh, ah, oh. And then I think the tough thing is I'm quite a conspiratorially, if that's even a term, I'm very much like a believer in vested interests and not conspiracy, because I think conspiracies people instantly think UFOs or JFK was shot by a person in a drain underneath from, and I love Joe Rogan's podcast. I know that's often I'm sure it is in the US as well. It's that people I say I listen to Joe Rogan's podcast and people go, "What? I've heard he's a Nazi," or something like that. They've never listened to his podcast. But I think people confuse a conspiracy with something very extreme like that, or I won't actually say the word because it could probably still get us banned, but certain medical treatments during the pandemic have like microchips in them or something like that. But actually, a conspiracy is a bunch of people getting together and working together and conspiring to achieve an outcome. And I would say the highly palatable processed food industry is does conspire together to skew data and people's thinking and funding certain. And again, I don't want to call out because people say, "Oh, this guy's a conspiracy theorist." But I think once I'd gone down that rabbit hole, I think it was then like, oh, okay, so all this stuff fits together. The problem is, and I think this is why I wanted to talk to you today, is that I thought with my OT business, with Wizard OT, because we've got something called the National Disability Insurance Scheme. I know I explained that last time on that other episode, but I was so lucky is that I kind of left my employer, opened up my referrals for Wizard OT, and ever since I've been flooded with referrals. Now, for anyone I know that runs a business, they're like, "What? You don't even hardly do any advertising?" I'm like, "No," but I think that made me think I could do a similar thing with metabolic therapy coaching or metabolic psychiatry informed occupational therapy, and it would just be endless flood of people going, "Yes, yes, signing up." So that's been a real eye opener. And I wanted to go through with you today these things because I bet there's a clinician or a person who wants to get into helping people through metabolic psychiatry focused principles or low carb, just anything. Because as we know, and I think we're both examples and we're both strong believers, it is so incredibly beneficial for so many physical and mental health issues. But I guess it's trying to help people to think, don't give up.